Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Solo ReacTalk. Tonight, I'm going to be reacting to Star Wars vs. Warhammer 40K, episode 25, Herald, made by the YouTube channel AFanWithTooMuchTime. If you want to check out my previous reactions to the other episodes, remember the playlist card is going to be at the top here. Just click on it and be able to access them. If you want to check out the original video as well as AFanWithTooMuchTime's YouTube channel, the links are in the description below. Yes, 2 weeks back, let me see the name again. It was Star Wars vs. Warhammer 40K short special, Defiance of Fate. Yes, Obi-Wan Kenobi has been defeated, if I can say that. He tried his best, to defend himself against the relentless attacks from Sarafan. And he was just waiting for him to make a mistake, and then he would exploit that mistake. However, instead of him waiting for that mistake, he is the one who made a mistake, and Safran took advantage of that mistake, and it resulted in Obi-Wan Kenobi's shins being shattered. So yeah, he's been defeated, but luckily, Mace Windu and the other Jedi who were accompanying him have come to save the day, essentially. And yeah, Mace Windu is now fighting against Sarafan. I don't know if he's fighting alone or is he fighting with his other Jedi companions. I'm not entirely sure, but I think they have to come to the realization, or I should say I have come to the realization that they have to retreat. They can't win this battle against Sarafan. No matter how many Jedi there are there, it just doesn't seem like they're going to make it. Sarafan is just one librarian and he is handling the situation. Yes, there were moments where it seems as if he was going to lose, he was going to fail, he was going to die, but this fight has been occurring for too long now. It just shows that the librarian, and I should say librarians within the Imperium of Man, are extremely powerful, long-lasting, and the Jedi have to think of new ways of fighting against opponents like this. So I think the Jedi who are fighting against Sarafan need to retreat, all of them, and live to fight another day, because there is no victory here. Even if they do find a victory somehow in this battle, it's going to cost them. So, retreat. Yeah. Okay, let us continue with episode 25. Yes, Herald. Okay. 3, 2, 1, go. I like the Game of Thrones soundtrack here from season 6, right? Night of the Seven, I think that's what it was called. Yeah.
The absence of faith is the mark of weakness. The avoidance of faith is the mark of the heretic. The abhorrence of faith is the mark of damnation. To the first, I offer redemption by way of fear, fury, and, if need be, righteous death. To the second, I am the hound of fire, always upon the scent, and always in pursuit of their wickedness. To the last, I am judgment, the final word spoken by blade and bolt and blazing flame. For I walk in the light of the Emperor, and I am already at his side.
This that's cool. That is really cool. She's reminding me of Rejulia, Sister Rejulia. So yeah, another Emperor's daughter is fighting against the clone troops, or maybe a Jedi. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it's cool, really.
The words were spoken without stealth, yet silenced, for her vox was muted, and her helmet permitted no sound to escape from within. It mattered not at all, for soon the enemy would know these words by the truth of her actions, with no utterances required. This was the natural state. She stepped into the corridor without even the shadow of fear trailing her feet, discarding from her person all semblances of mercy, compassion, or restraint. The dense clouds of billowing, dark incense shrouded her entry into the space, heralding her in thick, black mist. To her blessed eyes, the hallway was lit in green overlays of tactical information, the machine spirit of her holy raiment of battle bestowing her with sight beyond baseline sight. With it, her eyes did more than pierce the darkness. Each and every single one of the heretically birthed replique slaves were highlighted brightly in her vision, even through their barricades and small, insubstantial holdout positions. Before her, the passage was long, yet not so narrow that she would have any true trouble wielding her chosen weapon. Canoness Leandra Ordain stood at the far end.
Hold on. Canoness Leandra. Okay. Alright.
Sensor skulls softly warbling as they hovered over her broad, armored shoulders. Each blessed device was spilling thick fonts of scented, obscuring smoke over her holy armor and into her wake. Even with this shroud of purifying incense, she knew they would see her, if not by the power of their profane technology, then by the glow of her helm's green eye lenses, which she purposefully did not dim.
This is kind of reminding me of Star Wars Rogue One. You know, when Darth Vader was, coming aboard the Rebel vessel trying to attain the Death Star plans. And, there was smoke and there was a lot of darkness in the corridor, in the narrow passageway. And the rebels, were taking aim with their blasters. And then Lord Vader would come in there with activating his lightsaber. And, the darkness would give way to the red of the lightsaber. And, Lord Vader in the distance there. So, yeah, this is kind of reminding me of that here with the sister, her glowing green eyes. And, having her weapon in hand as well. And, yeah, the servitor skulls, producing this incense smoke around there. Yeah, really, it just reminds me of Rogue One.
For it was not her intention to hide. In accordance with the holy words of the Sisterhood, the Emperor's divine work should only be done in the light. And so she provided it. Leandra drew her blade, the Tabahaiv, the ruination of daemons, pulling the shard of divine lethality from the gem-encrusted and thrice-sanctified scabbard at her waist. The holy blade was the penultimate work of the greatest swordsmith of her world, and it proclaimed its pedigree with a pride worthy of a tool of the Emperor's wrath. It glowed with a dawn-shaded power field, shining like a pillar forged of dying stars, illuminating both itself and its bearer in fire-like radiance.
So it's not only the helmet with the green eyes, but also the blade is, glowing in the darkness. Oh, terrifying.
The canoness struck the martial form of her first assault, and in response, the skulls which flowed about her seemed to freeze in place, becoming very still as their eyes grew brighter, becoming a deep, violent red while Vox speakers built into the drones began to wake. From these archaic sound projectors poured forth a tremulous music. Many voices raised in grainy resolution, exalting the glory of the Emperor in beautiful hymns which gained in stability and quality the longer they played.
Wait a minute. You guys... Oh my gosh, I can just imagine. Like, the skulls are playing gospel music. They're playing gospel music while the sister is, charging towards the enemy. Imagine how that might feel for the clone troops, Here they are, they're trying to focus on fighting against this sister of battle, but then they're hearing gospel music while they're fighting. Nah, man, this is weird. This is so weird and distracting. It's extremely distracting.
The replicae, for all their many faults, had not chosen the sin of idleness. As the canoness entered and the music began to play, they busied themselves sighting her down, firing after only a couple of heartbeats, using pinpoint skill and the aid of her own illuminating blade to fire bolts of lethal blue energy into her chest and face. But they spattered against the skin of her master-crafted raiment like rain against the walls of a mighty fortress. Each long blue bolt burst as it made contact with the sister, the energized Tabana gas deflecting and scorching the hall and floors around her. She allowed them little enough time to make their opening shots before she proceeded to advance at pace. Trained in decades of battle, raised from birth to be a warrior, Leandra was everything the Kaminoan cloners had sought to mass-produce through flash learning and genetic manipulation. But what the aliens had tried to speed into creation, the Imperium had perfected. Not through cloning or intelligent selection, but by the brutal virtues of raw, evolutionary Darwinism, constant, unceasing conflict, and implacable, unreasoning faith.
Yes, sorry about that. What AFanWithTooMuchTime is saying here, in terms of the Star Wars side, in terms of the clones, they try to mass produce, fast track the development of soldiers, try to make them almost, what the Imperium of Man and its forces are like. But the Imperium of Man forces is a culmination of hundreds of thousands of years of continuous war, destruction, death, just fighting in and out. And, it's a part of them. It's a part of their DNA, you could say. They breathe it in and they breathe it out. Unlike the clone troops who, yes, they were taught how to fight, they were given weapons. They're coming from a very specific type of gene of human being that have been cloned, thousands of times. But I'm not going to count the clone troops out just yet. We've been shown multiple times that, the clone troops are capable soldiers. They are capable of pushing back the Imperium of Man. Yes, maybe not against the special forces, like the Astartes or a Sister of Battle, but the regular forces, yes, they can, meet up to their level. But yeah, I still don't count them out. I really don't count out the clone troops. And yeah, I'm just kind of worried about the clone troops who are facing up against Leandra, because, her armor is protecting her from the bolt weapons from the blasters, and she has this sword with her, and I just see a massacre here, really. So maybe they have a plan. I don't know. Hopefully. Hopefully they have a plan to try and stop her, but it just doesn't look good.
Leandra opened her mouth and sang, servos smooth as she lunged, unleashing a fluid power that should have been constrained to walkers and tanks many times her size. But this constraint was an illusion, one which she shattered with a single thrust of her horrendous, blessed blade. The troopers she had chosen were bracing their weapons against a makeshift barricade composed mostly of overturned desks and stacked carts, each false man firing into the canoness as she charged. Leandra lanced through them like they were not even there, mechanical muscles moving through the obstructions with absurd ease, the thrust of her shimmering sword even more so. It went into one of the clones, cooking him and blowing him apart in his own armor, even as his brothers had begun to scramble away. But she did not allow it, tearing the blade through the smoky air in an arc which caught both of the fleeing soldiers, scorching and blowing them apart and causing their erupting, boiling innards to cake the walls and ceiling. But she did not remain to admire the carnage. Bursting through the now molten barricade her blade had torn apart, the owl's eyes of her helmet already settled on the next targets. The replicate troopers who opposed her showed unusual valor, standing against her, roaring their lungs raw and holding their lines, even as she hacked and kicked and tore her way from one group of false men to the next. They had no way of stopping her, their weapons rendered utterly ineffective against the type of armor she had earned. The battle nearly turned, however, as Leandra became aware of a soft, metallic tinking nearby. Grenades, but not fragmentation grenades. She had been briefed on the replicate EMP spheres already and knew well enough what to do if she encountered them. Bellowing fanatical defiance, using her auto senses to locate the tossed spheres, she punted the grenades back the way they had come, ducking and running past the ones she could not reach. She wove between the opening umbrellas of electrical energy, forcing the replicate to maneuver into their radius or slicing through the ones that attempted to corral her into the blasts. Several enemy troopers near the rear began to effect a retreat, pulling back through a pair of large doors which they clearly intended to seal. Leandra sped up her pace in response, voice ringing wordlessly in her helm as she sang her litany. The canoness was a storm of light and smoke and death, a seraph of the Emperor's wrath, a master of the blade, demonstrating her skill in a lethal performance set to odes sung in her own voice, each one sworn to vengeance. White shells were parted without effort, melting, bursting apart. Blaster bolts and hails of blue gave answer, falling thickly down into the corridor. But what was not dodged was deflected, and what was not deflected was simply not sufficient. The canoness pinned the last replicate facing her to the door, driving her holy sword into him just after the doors had shut and sealed behind her victim. Her blade sank a little more slowly into the door, and she felt her brows scrunch as she spat. It would take her 50 or more seconds to cut her way through something like this without damaging her weapon. But never one to bemoan the task at hand, the sister drew her blade out in a savage arc, casting the burnt remains of the false man aside with a disdainful grace. She drew the burning weapon back, taking its grip in both hands, all the replicate behind her dead, all those left alive running before her.
I think she's heading into a trap. Yeah, like I've been stating, maybe the clone troops have a plan, and I think they're executing their plan right now. Maybe, yeah.
She stepped back, and then, with a practiced strike, thrust her blade into the corner of the door, and began to hack it open.
Okay, Nova and Farnes, right.
As they had agreed, Nerva climbed into the narrow space of the knight's cockpit ahead of Farnes, momentarily struggling to lower herself into it with only one arm. "Here, let me..." Farnes said, hooking his feet under the rungs of the nearby ladder and seizing the collar of the aspirant's armor, taking most of her weight and helping her feet reach the ancient throne beneath them without stumbling. She hissed an intake of air as he did, surprised by the sudden act, though thanks to Farnes's training, this kind of conjunction was near instinct. He followed her in soon after, voice wrenched from his mouth in the form of a sudden cry as blue bolts scorched the air over his head. He avoided any serious singeing, but that hardly helped his racing heart.
Wait, where's the other guardsman that, Farnes was trying to save? Where is she? Is she not also inside the Imperial Knight?
The guardsman had, at her insistence, removed his flak armor, including the supplemental plates he normally wore with it. And while he was far from literally naked, still dressed in his fatigues, the young man could not help but feel plainly naked without the protection of his helmet, breastplate, or boots. But the feeling passed as he descended the short distance inside, hands cold against the heat-stealing ceramite rim of the Nightwalker's hatch. Soon, Farnes was enveloped in a far more profound array of defenses than any flak armor, no matter how thick, could ever hope to provide. He suspended himself, bracing with his hands and feet as Nerva took her place at the controls. The tech priest below him sat herself in a throne-like command chair, taking the control stick at the end of one armrest with her good hand, while her bad arm was held tight and cushioned against her chest in a sling she had hastily fashioned. Farnes felt a chill pang of sympathy as he studied her, making a note of her injury as he followed her down and strained to sit in her lap. Feeling his face burn at the awkwardness of it, he nevertheless attempted to remain mindful of her wounded arm as he placed himself, his distraction causing him to press several keys and buttons on the walls near the command throne. These were mercifully inactive, resulting in nothing more than a greater chagrin for Farnes when he finally sat. To say that the seating was less than comfortable would be a sad understatement, for while he had removed his armor, Nerva had obviously not removed her own, and was notably augmented. Farnes doubted that she'd be much more comfortable to sit on, even naked, and he leaned his forearms against the free places on the armrests, taking his weight off her as much as he could manage, though mostly for her sake. Nerva noticed the odd position he had taken right away, and seemed confused by this for a moment before realizing what he was trying to do and almost chuckling at the effort. She didn't think much of guardsmen, and not in a derogatory way, but in a literal way. They were, more often than not, mere ants on any battlefield she shared with them, fighting on a different layer of the same war, and it was a layer that did not often intersect her own in a significant enough way to warrant prolonged thought. That being said, as a result of the events she was still taking part in, the worth of the Astra Militarum had been made abundantly clear to her. And more, she began to feel. After all, here was a single guardsman, just one. He was nothing, maybe even less than nothing. Yet, she could no longer see Farnes as that. Crammed inside the demigod engine, watching him try, Nerva found she simply could not see him as an ant any longer.
Yeah, this just also reminds me of 1313, of the Death Corps, the Death Creek soldiers, as well as the Acadian troopers. How their worlds intersected with one another. Because in the Imperium of Man, all of these different factions, they're all in their own little bubbles, and they all work towards the same goal, but they don't really coalesce with one another in terms of fighting against the same enemy. They all know where their boundaries are. They all know their responsibilities, and they don't tend to cross over those boundaries and responsibilities and communicate with other factions within the Imperium of Man. So yeah, it reminds me of 1313 and his Cadian shock trooper friends, and here with Nerva and Farnes, a guardsman and a Mechanicus of Mars a priest here, them working together in this Imperial night, it is something probably unheard of, and guardsmen inside a Imperial night touching the buttons, just trying to get inside this machine spirit, that's not been properly sanctified, and whatever else procedures that are required to appease this machine spirit. Here is a Imperial Guardsman just walking inside there, doing all of these unholy things, if I can say that, and it just shows how much trouble the clone troops and the Jedi are giving the Imperium of Man forces on Axum. They've had to do things a bit differently. They've had to join their forces together in a far more personal way than ever before, I think. Because like I said before, they're in their own little spheres of influence and their own spheres of governance and how they operate as a military. But now that they're fighting against the clone troops, things are starting to merge with one another. And yeah, I think it's good though. I really do think it's good for the future of the Imperium of Man forces in the Star Wars galaxy. They have to start, leaning on each other more often than ever before. Yeah.
And that shift horrified her as much as it honored her. So many ants, so many men lost, so much worth lost. She had access to her core systems and was sorely tempted to numb herself, to push off the revelation. But where perhaps her former master would have, she did not. She instead did the opposite, opening each of her sealed sensory gates with the exception of her arm and letting it all flow into her. This was truth, and she would not hide from truth, not in a holy place like this, not when the hand of the machine god was so obviously present. She released the control stick and rested her heavy hand on his shoulder.
Relax,
she said to Farnes from behind, her voice tight but controlled.
Sit fully. Who knows how long we're going to be in here? You must save your strength. And besides, I am armored, so I can barely feel your weight anyway.
She added. Right, sorry, he said, face still burning as he complied, shifting around for a moment before he found the most comfortable position. Okay, what now? He asked. In response, Nerva reached out to the control stick again, taking it and pressing a button under the lip of the handle with her pinky. The metal canopy above them screeched, making Farnes jump as it began to close, settling over their heads and hissing as it sealed shut and pressurized the cabin. Monitors all around them flickered to life, displaying the various symbols and creeds of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and lighting the otherwise dark interior in flickering gold and red hues. The sight was disorienting for the guardsmen, but to Nerva it was familiar enough. She had performed countless simulation test runs, and all of them had presumed this walker would be hers eventually.
First, I'm going to wake the machine spirit. Your friend is still strapped outside. If she is even still alive, then she needs help as soon as we can get it,
said Nerva, integration wires already beginning to worm out of the holes in her robe all along her spine as she spoke, linking into the throne behind her. So we'll be going for the lift? Farnes asked.
Yes. Hopefully the man your sergeant left behind will still be at the top and have the sense about him to activate it when we arrive. Time is limited either way, so we will need to strafe the Prometheum tanks on the way out.
This is before Commander Bile was crushed, right? Yeah, I think this all happened before Commander Bile was crushed and, Majors Dominus was saved by the Imperial Knight. Yeah.
She said. We? The guardsman asked nervously.
Yes, we. I'm going to control the arms and legs of this thing, but I'm still going to need you to use certain weapons, since my arm is out of commission. I will run us by and aim the weapon, but you will have to fire it.
The aspirant said. Farnes firmed his chin and nodded stiffly. Okay, how do I fire the weapon?
Do you see that control stick? The one with the 3-pronged trigger?
She asked. He paused for a moment to look around at the armrests before locating the control stick on the side with Nerva's wounded arm and nodded. Yes, I see it, he said.
Good, take it. That will be the one you use to control the last impulsor. The first trigger on the top will charge the weapon. The second one will prime the cooling system. And the last one will fire the impulsor. You will have to do them all in sequence to use the gun without killing us.
Yo, guys, I'll forget. I will forget. Oh, wow. Okay, so the first one, you charge the weapon. The second one, you activate the cooling systems. And then the third one is the one you use to fire. Okay. And you have to do it in sequence. Huh. Good luck, Farnes.
Do you understand?
She said. He swallowed hard and took the cold control stick in his hand, closing clammy fingers around the large red trigger prongs which protruded from it. They were oddly warm.
Did you get all that?
Nerva asked again. Yes, he answered.
Okay, good. Well then, guess I better stop stalling. Listen, your name is Farnes, right?
She asked. He nodded.
Listen, Farnes. I've never actually performed the ritual of becoming, and we don't really have time for me to go through it. Not naturally, at least.
She began to explain, a chilling hesitance permeating her words. Farnes felt that chill as well, tainting his guts and freezing his spine, sending bolts of iced lightning down his fingertips. He had no idea what the ritual of becoming was, or how important it was for what they were about to try. But she seemed to think it was pretty damn important. So what does that mean? He asked nervously. Nerva bit her lip, trying to figure out how to explain it before starting to speak again.
It means that I'm going to have to dive in there. Completely.
She said. Dive in there? Dive in where? Farnes asked.
Into the machine. I'm going to connect my mind to it, and I'm not going to leave much in my body. Maybe nothing. It is not likely that I will survive doing this at all. And honestly, I'd be lucky to live through it with only a roasted cerebral cortex. But if I do manage to do this, and I do come out of this alive...
She began to say, voice starting to tremble. Yes, yes? He pressed.
Well, if we survive, do not tell anyone that I did this. Do you understand?
She said. What? Tell them you did what? Farnes asked.
Piloting this Imperial Knight with EU on board it. Because I don't think Imperial Guardsmen are supposed to be inside these machines, Like I said before, this is tantamount to sacrilege, if I can say, It's unheard of. It's improper for a guardsman who is not part of the Mechanicus, to be inside these holy machines, of the machine god. So yeah.
Any of this, that I let unauthorized soldiers into the greater maintenance bays, or that I made the knight move without interfacing with it, or that I tried performing this... I don't even know what to call it. All of it. Any of it. You can't tell anyone. If Omnicraden found out about any of this, he'd turn me into one of his thinking servitors or worse. This is very important. Do you understand?
She
What's worse than being a servitor, guys? What's worse? I mean, death is far more preferable than being turned into a lobotomized human being. Death is far more preferable. So what's worse than being a servitor, guys?
asked, voice frayed from the stress of the reveal. Well, he started.
Do you understand?
She pressed. Yes, all right, by light and faith and fire, my lips are sealed, Farnes said.
All right. Thank you.
She said. I'll see you after, he said to her, fear still obvious in his voice, but joined with a genuine hope. She smirked at that.
See you after,
she said, before going suddenly rigid behind him. Nerva? He asked. But the aspirant was gone, and Nerva, the prodigious apprentice of the Knights Mechanicus, charged a battlefield she could never have prepared for. And yet, charge it she did. Honestly, this is no way to treat a Magos! The not Magos exclaimed to no one in particular, for there
Not Magos? So what are you?
was no one in particular to exclaim it to. Yes, there were the menial servitors, all 9 of them, all of whom could physically do nothing more about his complaint than drone mindlessly about the extremely basic duties that they could perform. And yes, there were also the humming, churning cogitators all around him, but while they made plenty of noise, they did not do any listening, and they rarely responded to his concerns, and that was a problem. After all, what was the point of having stolen the title of Magos if one could only exercise its authority over the mindless tools of their own craft?
You stole the title? Is that even possible? Wow, alright.
Even an engine seer had such privileges. And it was not as though he sought authority over others for personal pride's sake, or anything equally as base. No, never!
Never! Oh yes, never.
The whole universe was a grand mechanism, and for every part of it that was left out of place, the whole machine suffered further chaos. And he was certainly out of place here. Even now, as he went over the schematics for his latest pattern variant on the Taurox Trooper Carrier, he was consistently reminded of how subpar his surroundings were. He understood well enough that the jailer had little duty to the comforts of their captive, but when the jailer was keeping a mind like his prisoner, and doing so specifically for the work that mind could do, it struck the imposter priest as unforgivingly illogical to not increase the value of his captivity by making the facilities he worked within even moderately acceptable. Such thoughts drew his mind back to Call, and from him to his current quote-unquote master. The very man who kept him locked up here, siphoning only spoonfuls of his insight as if secretly attempting an assassination through infliction of sheer boredom. Damn that Omnicraden! Were my true master here, he would... A sound cut through the thunking of the cogitators and the ranting of the enslaved mind, drawing his attention to the communications terminal, which sat nearby, pulsing with the odd noise. Eagerly, but carefully, the captured Magos, who was no true Magos at all, extricated himself from his workstation, drawing up his red robe once all of his mechadendrites had retracted themselves. He then made his way to the bleeding terminal, stabbing the squat device with a prehensile mechadendrite and silencing it before queuing up the caller on the screen. Current 82 Velen greeted him, his blue countenance roughed up, though, in spite of this, the blind priest curled his lips into a subtle, yet present smile.
Long time no see. Long time no see.
The time has come. The self-proclaimed Archmagos has missed his pickup window, and it will be hours before the next one.
If we are to relocate you and your knowledge, it must be done now.
The Electro-Priest said firmly. The captive imposter rocked back on his heels at the news.
Now? But I'm not sure I'm ready to egress. I just got this terminal secured, and I'm only 98.777 repeating % sure that I fully infiltrated my guard servitors. I've no relevant maps or navigational data of this ship beyond what's immediately around my cell. I've no idea how to reach you, or what I would do if I encountered resistance. Velen, I'm not even packed yet!
The plea had no effect on C-82.
Find a way. Use your trump card if you have to.
Trump card? What's that?
He said.
But Velen, we are being boarded by enemy troops. If I use my back door, it will automatically cut down the data security and firewall cohesion across the entire ship.
Again, C-82 only shrugged, seeming not to care at all.
They are boarding the ship we are attached to, actually. But even if they were not, what care have we for the security of Omni Creighton and his inquisitorial pet? Let their heresies suffer the sting of their own self-wrought sin. Do not overthink this, 84. If you do, you will not escape. Meet me in the Greater Honoring Hall as soon as you can. Current 82 Velen, out.
And with those words, the transmission went white and ended, leaving the false Magos to jitter and fuss about before finding his resolve.
Alright. Calm down. Just think. What would Call do? What would the true Archmagos do?
He said aloud to himself.
Well, I suppose he would have released the backdoor virus weeks ago and tried to escape on his own. Perhaps that should have been my first instinct as well. I suppose I'll do so now. Oh, what is the term he used? Better late than never? But what if I get lost? No, stop it! Call would not even pause at the possibility of being lost. You just blunder in and so will I, because today I escape. I decided that. Me.
The not
Okay.
a quiet man said, puffing out his chest as much as he was able to before turning to his cogitators and extending out his many mechadendrites.
Well, I suppose it's time to get to work.
He said, swallowing hard, or rather making the physical gesture and activating his trump card. Beside him in the room, the previously barred entryway slid open with a mechanical sigh. He gathered what things he could and even took a deep breath as he stepped through the portcullis.
Oh, Omnisaya, guide my path. I hope it won't undermine my display of resolve too much if I occasionally consult a local console for directions.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Damn you, innumerable heretics!
The psychic space marine bellowed, hand extending out and becoming the origin point of an explosive wave of shrieking electricity. It ripped out across the air between the massive warrior and the two he was trying to smite, his wrath taking the form of a cavorting storm of demonic lightning. The two Jedi did not veer to avoid the coming psychic death. One of them, the alien Lasat known as Master Tapal, maintained his posture perfectly as he pulled on the librarian, while the other, the human Jedi known as Jedi Master Windu, dove in from the center and straight into the attack. As the powerful Jedi Master threw himself towards the Space Marine, he moved his mind, spirit, and blade into the now horribly familiar rotations that composed Vapad. His body seemed to collide with the ravaging waves and arcs of the attack, falling into tendrils of the dark side so thick and so dark they could corrupt the very air. But as these serpents of energy closed in on their presumed prey, the Jedi revealed himself to be the Predator, absorbing the energies and converting them into his own strength. Safran's blood iced at the sight, and he realized then that his former assessment about the warp capabilities of the Jedi had been more correct than he dared have hoped. But the moment of epiphany was fleeting, for it was not 2 seconds later that the warrior known as Mace Windu was upon him. Safran drew in his power once more, turning to the enhancements of his own body and natural abilities now that he knew the Jedi could potentially devour offensive warp arts. Even with this, however, he found himself struggling to keep his force stave between his body and the malevolent purple blade that was attempting to impale him. This man was an entirely different creature, even from the knight he had been facing before, the one known as Obi-Wan Kenobi. Where Kenobi had been a shell of unbreakable defense, this man before him now was truly the essence of offensive action. Not only fast, but strong, and not only strong, but unerringly accurate. This Safran learned the hard way as he was dragged forward, forced to defend himself while his footwork could not but keep him upright. While the librarian had succeeded in warning off the purple blade with wide warding sweeps of his stave, he also found himself falling victim to the very same flaw that had seen the old Jedi Master from earlier nearly crushed to death by Safran's mailed fist. Windu drew his attention with one hand while punching and striking with the other. Initially, Safran thought to ignore the Jedi's bare-handed strikes, only to become aware of how enormous a mistake that was, once the first 4 blows had connected. The man punched and hit like an autocannon burst at close range. But that was not all. It wasn't even the worst of it. Safran's power armor was, as its name suggested, powerful. But it was also old, ancient. A 7,000-year relic that had been only mostly maintained by his chapter. Even in such resplendent war gear, flaws were bound to occur, chinks were certain to be formed. And this man, Mace Windu, seemed to know the location of every single one. He did not just punch his warp-wreathed fist into the opening that appeared, but instead, he specifically funneled his damaging blows into the most vital openings.
Very impressive, Mace. Very, very impressive. But it's not enough. It's not enough. I mean, yes, the armor is protecting the librarian, but the librarian still has, this physicality. All Astartes have this huge muscle presence that, the armor is just a second layer of their power, So even if you do defeat, or you dent the armor, or you crack the armor, or the armor is peeled away from the librarian, he's still extremely powerful and strong. So yeah, I don't know. I'm impressed by Master Windu's attacks, yes, but it's not enough.
Ripping at wounds inflicted on the warplate centuries past, bursting flawed seams and ceramite reinforcements, and shattering Safran's weak points wherever they presented themselves. Defending himself from these true strikes all too late, the librarian realized with a sickening sensation that the battle had just turned out of his favor. If he had known, if he had somehow been able to just anticipate such a combination, a final swing of his stave forced the Jedi Master off of his offensive, leaving the Space Marine skittering across the steel ground towards the second warrior. Already, Safran could tell that he had lost power in his left shoulder and arm. The servos there now locked and struggling against his movements instead of aiding them, all thanks to the Jedi Master's precise attacks. This forced him to wield his stave one-handed as he approached the second Jedi Master at rapid pace. Feet still screeching and scraping, the subtleties of stance mostly denied to him yet again. The alien released his telekinetic grip, relying on momentum to carry Safran the rest of the way as he whipped his saber staff up into a flourish. Safran's teeth bled in his gums as he clenched them, locking the staves together before taking a clothesline stroke from the alien's other arm.
The librarian was pitched onto his back by the blow, releasing his stave and barely rolling out of the way before the Lasat Jedi Master buried one of his double blades into the floor where Safran had just been. He came up to his feet and backed away warily, watching as the alien yanked his weapon contemptuously from the floor, eyes fixed on the librarian. Mace Windu calmly walked back to his fellow master's side, and the two of them crouched slightly, preparing for their second assault. Safran spat out a tooth and growled deep within his throat. Though they all looked fairly similar, clearly the span and range of these Jedi and their abilities was the essence of inconstant. In one instance, he found himself tearing through scores of them. And in the next, he was stopped by one and then nearly defeated by two. Admittedly, he was worn down from his previous feats, but he could not help but muse to himself, briefly, how many other enemies of the Jedi had found themselves in a similar trap. How many other rivals of their order had tested them and come to underestimate them due to this very factor. The Jedi were an order of sheep, shepherded by true masters, or so it seemed. But even now, Safran knew it would not be enough. It could not be. First, he had humored them. Then he had taken the worthy seriously. Now they pressed him into desperation, into danger, into recklessness. And while Safran knew that he would risk failing to survive his own recklessness, he was certain that they would fail to survive it as well. He spoke no words to the masters, for this was now a true battle, and words had little place here.
If he's quiet, then you guys know this is going to be a very dangerous situation that is coming up, you know? Because, yeah, like AFanWithTooMuchTime has been saying, you know, Safran has been amusing them, has been talking to them, has been, you know, making things like banter between him and Obi-Wan Kenobi. I remember those those moments, but now those moments are gone. You know, he's serious, he's a little bit desperate, and yeah, it's just I want them to retreat. You know, I want them to retreat. I don't think they can win this battle against Safran. They need to retreat. All of them.
He reached with his working arm to his opposite shoulder and jammed his fingers under the unresponsive and damaged plate. With a tug and a sigh of mechanical relief, the servos unlocked, becoming dead weight against his muscles. Withdrawing his hand, he extended his still-powered right arm out to the side, and his stave scraped from the floor behind the Jedi, spinning out towards them like the blades of a rotocopter. Mace Windu and Jaro Tapal both evaded the surprise attack with sidelong lunges and spins which carried them just out of the weapon's reach as it oscillated through where they had been standing previously. The haft of the Force stave slapped heavily into the Space Marine's palm, and he took it, testing the mobility of his unpowered limb as he took the weapon in both hands and worked through a small set of quick flourishes.
Like I said, you know, the power armor, yes, it does give like an extra layer of power and defense for the Astartes or librarians, but you know, even if you take that off, they're still physically very powerful human beings. So yeah, it was just not enough what Mace Windu did, you know, finding the weak points in the armor of Safran. It's just not enough.
It would have to do. Meanwhile, the Jedi had regrouped, now extending their hands once more, grasping at him with the Force. But this time, Safran did not wait to feel the pull. This time, Safran came running straight for them, bloody teeth bared, his face a mask of war.
Anakin Skywalker, R2-D2, and the Herald. Oh, okay. This is the Herald. It must be the guy in the sarcophagus, right? Okay.
Anakin had maintained some vague hopes and suspicions about what, or rather who, he might find inside the Imperial prisoner's coffin. Perhaps a bedraggled, tortured husk of a man, or a resilient soul confined within a starved and ravaged body. As the heavy doors of the Iron Maiden-like coffin squealed open and lifted away, Anakin found himself both correct and surprised at once. The being he found within those cold confines of ceramite and steel was massive, and seemed composed of scarred, tortured muscles and altered, dusky flesh. As Anakin absorbed these details, he was struck at once by a terrible sense of recognition. This man was no mere man, nor even an alien of any kind. This prisoner held before him was a space marine. One of the gene-enhanced super soldiers of their enemy, and among the last things he had expected to find waiting within.
If this person was kept in the sarcophagus, right, then that means it's a traitor, a space marine who has betrayed the Imperium of Man and have joined, the chaos side of things. And yeah, okay, that's interesting. Let's see how this all turns out. Maybe they might become allies because, the traitor Astartes, they don't want to do anything with the Imperium of Man. They serving the Chaos Guards. And yeah, I mean, they could have an allegiance here, because the Star Wars galaxy also doesn't want this Imperium of Man incursion to continue. So, a possible ally.
Anakin's eyes widened and then blazed with what little force potential he had left, enabling the Jedi to see clearly even in the poor lighting of the room. His strength in the Force was enough to reveal arcane etchings coating the prisoner Marine's dark skin, carved across scars from countless battles, while runic circles born of more recent struggles were branded into the man by the coloring of unnatural inks and fire conjoined. He had no arms, his limbs having been removed below his mountainous shoulders during his incarceration. His eyes, too, had been cut out of his skull during a similar process.
Okay, no. For a moment there, I thought it was Abaddon, because he doesn't have arms. Yeah, but then as soon as the AFanWithTooMuchTime said, the eyes are also gone, I'm like, no, that can't be Abaddon. Abaddon still has his eyes, right? So yeah, it can't be. Yeah, it's not possible. It's just not possible. Yeah, it's not possible.
Skin around those vacant pits having been stitched shut. But that was not all. Across the Astartes' bedraggled body were long, thick piercings composed of straight rods of black metal, each mercilessly inserted into his living flesh, though not in ways which would prevent his movement, at least not by much. Just looking at these metal bars made Anakin's head pound, and he...
There must be, suppressors for those with warp, those who are warp sensitive, those who are able to use warp abilities. So yeah, it must be a chaos marine librarian or a sorcerer of some sort, and yeah, they've kept him inside this place.
Who was instantly aware of their bizarre nature, sensing with startling precision the effects the rods were having on the area around them. They were each swallowing up what little presence of the Force could exist and numbing it to nothing. It was not unlike the effects of a Ysalamiri, though operating on completely different principles. He moved his eyes away from the rods, feeling his own strength departing with each passing second he stared at them, enhanced eyes shifting back towards the man's face. Held upside down as Anakin had been, without arms and with ankles bound together by closely linked chains of ceramite, the Jedi had expected the man to flop onto the ground with all the grace and certainty of a dying fish. Instead, the scarred Space Marine flexed what remained of his considerable muscles, holding himself inside the coffin for a few moments while he folded his body in half at the waist and drunkenly rolled himself forward onto his joined feet.
Wow, that's impressive. That's really impressive. That's cool.
Managing more grace with the movement than Anakin had during his own release. The Astartes then slowly rose to stand, appearing powerful in spite of all the deprivations he had suffered, even as he slumped under the weight of what must have been unimaginable fatigue. In spite of that gesture, however, the Marine bore his teeth in a large tombstone smile, and soon he was speaking as well. Evidently, his tongue had not been removed, and his lips had not been sewn shut, as his eyes had.
Ah, you have my profound gratitude, stranger. I hope that you can understand my own tongue, as I very much like to converse with someone other than Thoth for a change.
Yeah, you definitely sound like a Chaos Marine. Definitely. You sound like one of those Traitor Legion Chaos Marines. Yeah.
Said the Marine in an oddly refined accent.
You have not the bearing or the caution of an Inquisitor or his agents.
The man went on.
Am I correct in assuming a shared purpose between us?
He asked. Anakin took a half step back. Even bowed by torture and reduced as he was, the Space Marine was almost a head taller than the Jedi, and, in a million small, subtle ways, Anakin could see that the man he faced was less a man than he was some kind of bioengineered weapon. His skin was pocked with scars from other such implements and foes, both alien and unimaginable, puckered with mechanical sockets meant for weapon and armor integrations. And his entire body could be nothing but the result of intense genetic manipulation. As he absorbed his details, Anakin found himself wondering if the man-thing which stood before him had even been the product of a natural birth. And as he did, for the briefest moment, a shadow of horror crossed over the Jedi's mind. The image of countless tanks in dark laboratories, growing these men, these things in mass, forced its way into his mind. But what terrified him about that image was not the idea that the Imperials were doing such things, but rather how easily he could see the Republic imitating them. Was this where they were headed? Had he not already seen the beginnings of this very process incarnated within the men he had come to this ship with? In the clones?
Yeah, but I don't think they will ever reach to the level of the Astartes and, the program of creating Astartes. And Astartes were not, they're not clones, they're not these human beings that have been birthed through vat machines or something like that. These guys were like normal, regular human children who were inducted to become Astartes. So, yeah, it's not going to be the same.
Clone Force 99 itself? The thought was too potent and too strangulating to handle now, and so he shoved it back, taking a deep breath before he began to speak. I can understand you. You're lucky I've always been good with languages. My name is Anakin Skywalker, and I'm a general for the Galactic Republic. Glad as I am to lend my aid to any prisoner in need, I'm going to have to ask you something in return for my services. Anakin said. The huge, armless man smirked.
Well, I am hardly in any position to pay you back at this moment. However, if I can be free of this place...
The Space Marine began to say. Anakin raised his hand instinctively, making to speak, and was momentarily shocked when the man cut himself off going silent as though he could see the gesture, which the Jedi knew he could not. Without missing the beat, Anakin spoke. Actually, you are. What I want isn't so different from what I assume the people who have you here want. I have questions I'd like to ask you. The Jedi said to the Marine. The man paused as he listened, and did not answer right away. Instead, he sniffed the air briefly, rolling a large, discolored tongue across chapped and scarred lips. He seemed to wait, tasting the air before nodding his head.
I see. And what if I'm reluctant to answer any questions? What if I suspect this is just another ploy to loosen my lips and to make me speak where before I was silent?
The Marine asked, arching an eyebrow over the shallow skin of one of his closed eye sockets. In response, Anakin swung his saber towards the man, bringing his weapon down in an overhead chop. The Marine tensed and leaned back to the side in an awkward retreat, narrowly dodging the humming blade with the ugly but effective maneuver. The saber came down dramatically, gouging an inch into the ground before Anakin drew it back. The Marine's feet spread into a ready crouch, a sheen of sweat slicking his head as adrenaline began to pump. Anakin noticed that the air was suddenly spiked with an acidic aftertaste, as if the man's sweat itself was a chemical byproduct of a more mechanical being. The man flared his nostrils, crouching, predatory nature emerging, before relaxing as he realized what Anakin had done. If you refuse to answer my questions, Anakin said, spinning his saber back in front of him, then that will be all the help you get from me. The Jedi said with his own smirk, deactivating his saber as he spoke and half turning away from the Space Marine, whose ankles were no longer bound together thanks to Anakin's strike. Good luck breaking out of this place without us, he added, R2-D2 throwing in a whistle for effect. The Marine seemed stunned for a second, face tensing and neutral before melting into a tense smile, his tight grin revealing massive, blocky teeth, some of which were broken or had been removed.
A relevant point. I see you have some burning questions.
The Space Marine said, standing straighter once more.
And I've many answers to satiate you with, General. More than you can well imagine. But let us limit ourselves to the things of relevance. At least for the moment.
The man said, sounding only a little tired.
Wait, did he call him General? I don't remember Anakin Skywalker saying that he was a general. I do remember him saying that, yes, I'm Anakin Skywalker. You know, I represent the Galactic Republic and stuff like that, but I don't remember him saying that he was a general. Okay, maybe I missed that part. But you know, if the Herald is able to ascertain that Anakin Skywalker is a general without him saying that he's a general, then that's very interesting. We're dealing with a very powerful person here. Definitely.
Anakin turned back around, facing towards him fully and smiling for a moment before pausing to think. He stroked his own chin, wondering what manner of query he should prioritize, as time was severely limited. Only what he needed to know in order to understand if he could take this Space Marine with him. If he could, then he would be able to ask all the questions he wanted once they were both safe and outside of this cursed prison. Do you work for the Imperium? Are you their ally? Anakin asked. The man chuckled and shook his blind head, though that was not enough confirmation for the Jedi. Even as the Space Marine began to answer, Anakin reached out as far as he could with his limited power, limiting himself to the very edge of his surface thoughts for safety's sake. Even so, the effort made him sweat, and the Marine seemed not to notice it.
No,
the larger warrior said. Anakin focused, holding back a hiss as he inspected the Astartes' claim with the Force. The act would have been very difficult as it was, but in addition to the silenced air between them, the horrible pressure of the force-denying field which surrounded them both, the Jedi Knight found himself having to also manipulate his influence carefully around the strange, straight bars of black metal which were inserted into the man's body. The horrid element seeking to grasp his metaphysical attempts to confirm the truth and silence them. The sensations he got from the bars were bizarre. Mechanical, yet not mechanical. There was a manufactured, almost droid-like quality to their vampiric effects on his strength, one which felt as though it went far beyond the mere mundanity of a refined ore. As he considered this, the Marine continued to speak.
I am no ally to the now fallen Imperium. Long ago, I did serve as their soldier, their killer. Now I am my own soldier, and I kill only for myself and my legion. Where once I dispensed death in the name of the Emperor, now I choose where and who is deserving of it.
He said, and from the limited power Anakin commanded, the Jedi Knight parsed each word, looking for any sign of deception, and could sense no falseness or lies from the prisoner's claims.
And what of you?
The Marine added as the Jedi contemplated his answer. Anakin raised an eyebrow at that. What about me? Anakin asked.
Are you a slave to the current Imperium? Does your Republic pay tribute to them? Do you kneel before the Golden Throne?
The rogue Marine asked. Anakin's face grew lined, and he almost spat onto the floor, the very notion of the act bringing bile to his mouth. More shockingly, however, he felt a soft press on his senses, and began to wonder if there was not more to this man than steely muscle and iron will. Whether that was truth or delusion, Anakin answered honestly. They wish. We are currently at war with them, and I'll see every blaster used up to its last bolt before I allow anything like that to happen, the Jedi Knight said, spitting the words with a true conviction.
It's just interesting, that he would fight with all of his might against the Imperium of Man, this empire. But, in a different universe, if I could say, or a different timeline, Anakin Skywalker bends the knee to Darth Sidious, who becomes the Emperor of, the Galactic Empire, and he becomes, his loyal and trusted servant to this empire. He serves this empire. He destroys all enemies in the name of this empire. So yeah, it's interesting, really.
The large, armless man's smile grew a little wider at the sound of that tone, hearing the fervor in the young general's voice and knowing it signaled fertile soil for opportunity. The crimson path would be blazed yet, and it seemed his time as nothing more than a herald was reaching its penultimate conclusion. As he pondered this, the Jedi asked his next question. Whom do you serve then, if not the Imperium? Besides yourself, I mean. Are you a part of some larger organization or ideology? What is your legion, and where are they now? Anakin asked, his words cutting through the Marine's thoughts.
Though I serve by my own choice, I have indeed chosen a new master, and a new way of being that is apart from the insanity of the Imperium. I serve the black and gold, and I am known by others of my branding as the Herald of the Crimson Path. I come before the War Master of the Empyrean in order to prepare the way for my legion, the Black Legion.
He said. Anakin cringed at the words. Crimson Path, War Master, Black Legion?
The Black Legion is the Sons of Horus, right? And before they were called the Sons of Horus, they were the Lunar Wolves, right? and they were the traitor legion of Horus Lupercal. Okay.
None of those names inspired much hope in the Republic General, and the Jedi made a mental note in that moment. Even if he did end up freeing this warrior, he'd have to be careful, lest this nefariously named faction follow in the wake of the Imperials and become a third antagonist in their war.
I think he will, but not right now. Not right now. He'll probably assist you in, helping to push back the Imperium of Man and maybe possibly defeat them completely. And then once that is done, you will have to deal with him because he will ultimately betray you as well. That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
Black Legion? No offense, but that hardly sounds better than the Imperium of Man. What is the goal of your Legion? What are you after? Anakin asked. The man turned to the Jedi then, angling his head as though he could see him despite the Marine's obvious lack of eyes. Anakin watched as the man's expression lost much of its levity, lines drawing over dark skin.
The Black Legion exists for a single primary purpose. We live and fight, and many times we die, in order to finally kill the Emperor of the Imperium. We exist to bring a just reckoning to the false Imperium. My brothers in black and I have a common cause to hate the corpse throne and the many tyrannies of its countless underlings. We will not cease, we will not rest, and we will not stop our long war. Not until the insanity of the Imperium is finally brought to a long and overdue end, and our War Master Abaddon sits the burnt throne. In short, Anakin Skywalker, the Black Legion exists to free ourselves and excoriate the filth and ignorance that rules over our galaxy in the form of the dead and mute idiot god of the Imperium.
I like how you said that, the dead and mute idiot god. Oh, that was funny. That was actually funny. But Anakin, you must read between the lines, when he says these things. Because he's not really telling you the complete and utter truth and what it entails, in terms of overthrowing this, stupid and mute, useless god and his Imperium. He doesn't tell you how they go about doing such things. So yeah, be careful. Be careful.
Said. Now it was Anakin's turn to smile. While he could easily see that this man was no obvious friend of his Republic, the animosity the Marine had towards the Imperium was a weapon of its own, and one Anakin was craving to wield. He needed more insight, more power, more ways to fight the Golden Throne in all its horrendous incarnations. And in this traitor, the Jedi General saw the potential for all of that and much, much more. Alright, Herald of the Black Legion, if I free you, if I take you before the members of my council and stand for you before them, will you help me? The Jedi Knight asked.
Help you what?
The Space Marine replied without hesitation. Will you help me, help the Republic, rebuff this Imperial invasion? Will you help us learn about this enemy? Will you help us crush them in battle and defeat them in this war? Anakin asked. The Marine was silent for a few moments, his face blank as he seemed to consider what few options he had left.
If you help free me from this prison, if you offer me shelter and safety from my pursuers, then yes, I will help you, General of the Republic,
said the man. The Jedi smiled and stepped forward. All right, then consider it a deal, Anakin said, extending his hand out towards the renegade, only belatedly remembering that the man was armless and drawing his hand back a second later in mild chagrin. The Marine scoffed slightly and smirked a toothy, broken grin.
Did you just extend your hand towards me?
The man asked, sounding unexpectedly amused. No, obviously not. Anakin said, face burning just a little. I was swatting a fly, Anakin lied. One last question, Herald, he added, changing the subject. What are those bars you have pierced through you? They feel strange, unnatural, the Jedi said. The man almost seemed to look down at himself for a moment before venting out a heavy sigh.
They're a countermeasure, a barbaric means of making sure I cannot use my warp-based abilities to aid myself. They are a brutal redundancy. I could not touch the warp in any potent or meaningful way, not while I'm locked in this place. Even if I removed... Wait. Are you touching those bars? Physically?
The Space Marine asked suddenly. No, I'm, sensing them. I also have, warp abilities of my own. I can still use them, but only a little, Anakin said. The man looked shocked, as though he had been suddenly slapped across the face or dunked into ice-cold water.
So you are sensing them in here, right now?
He asked, a touch of astonishment tinting the man's voice. Anakin nodded and scratched the back of his head. Well, yeah, right now. I did get fully cut off when I came near that crazy, whatever that woman is, who's patrolling in the halls out there.
Sister of Silence.
Otherwise, yes, I can still feel the warp. But calling on it is like trying to suck air through a straw. I can barely manage it, Anakin admitted. The man paused, languishing in stunned silence for a couple of moments before shaking his head in a resigned way.
What is your ideology, General?
The Space Marine suddenly asked. Anakin seemed shocked by the question, but answered it nonetheless. I serve the Jedi Knights of the Galactic Republic, he said.
Jedi? Did you say Jedi Knight?
The Marine asked. Yes. Do you know of us? Anakin asked back. The name seemed to stir something inside the man, but after several terse seconds, his feet sliding over the floor in an odd way, he spoke again.
No, I do not. But I thought, in any case, we should direct our attention to escaping. It is only a matter of time before we are discovered in this room and recaptured. Becoming a prisoner yourself succeeded in getting you inside this cell, but I doubt any ploy of similar direction will work to get us out.
The Space Marine said. Anakin grinned and looked down at R2-D2, who whirred in response. You could say I've got a skeleton key to this prison, at least for now. When you've got the strength to, I'll open the door and... The Jedi Knight began to say.
That will not work. Your man of iron may have been able to sneak in here, but sneaking both of us out will be impossible. And
I like the fact that he used the term, your man of iron. Yeah.
the instant the enemy knows I'm free, they will come for us with everything they have. It'll be far more than either of us can deal with together or alone.
The crippled Marine said. I guessed that much from the security I saw when I came in, but we have no other option. Would it be better to wait here until we are discovered naturally? Maybe overwhelm the guards? Anakin asked. The man chuckled at the idea.
As cathartic as that would be, it would get us no closer to being free. No, I think we will need a different key. Not the one at your side, but the one in your hand.
said the prisoner, his feet ceasing their sweeps as he found the inch-deep divot in the floor, the one Anakin had left in the ground when he'd freed the Marine from his shackles. Anakin smirked dubiously at that, looking down at his saber. I suppose I could cut our way out, but how would that be any better than silently taking the door? He asked.
Because we are not heading for the exit. We are heading for an armory of sorts. But the first thing we need to do is alleviate ourselves of this psychic suppression. In the center of this facility, there is a machine that suppresses our connection to the warp. Reaching it will be impossible. It's too heavily guarded. But it is also insufficient to cover the entire prison. To shore up the edges and gaps, each of these rooms is constructed with a room beneath it, where sit 3 or 4 blanks.
The Marine explained. Blanks? Anakin asked.
They are anti-psychers. Where we pull in the power of the warp and connect to it, they repel it and push it away. We need to kill them and head towards the port side until we exit the influence of the suppressor,
said the ravaged captive.
I just wonder how you guys are going to kill these blanks, because the moment you come in close proximity with them, you become ill. You become sick. You can't really face them, head on in a fight. So I'm just wondering, how are you guys going to achieve that?
Port side. Wait, that's the opposite direction of the entrance I came in through. Is there another exit in that direction? The Jedi asked. The Marine shook his head and kept his now subtle smile.
No, there is only one fixed entrance and exit, and the suppressor sits virtually beside it.
Then why go to port? Anakin asked.
Because that is where the foul proprietor of this prison has taken my weapons. If my guess is correct, he will still have them for examination. His hubris and curiosity will be his downfall. Once I have those weapons, I will be able to create a new way out for both of us.
Anakin paused to consider it, but grit his teeth and nodded, activating his lightsaber. The blanks are directly below us? Anakin asked.
Very nearly. I will show you where to cut. We should emerge right on top of them,
answered the Marine. All right. Lead the way, Herald. The Jedi Knights began to say, his words scythed off by the Marine's sudden interjection.
I call you by your name. You should call me by mine,
he said. Sure, I have to admit, I half expect you to give me a number. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Some of the best men I know have numbers for names, said Anakin. The Space Marine laughed, but there was no joy in it.
Despite what you see before you, Anakin Skywalker, I am not some tank-bred weapon, grown into a mold to be dumped onto a laboratory floor and then given a gun. I was born just as you were. My life began under the eyes of 9 burning stars on the desert world of Prospero. There, before I was taken. Before I was promised justice and strength and a place among the stars by the false Imperium, I was given my name by a family long lost to me.
So, if he's from Prospero, then shouldn't he be part of the Thousand Sons Legion, the 15th? Because he said that he's part of the Black Legion. Huh. Okay. Maybe he could switch legions when he was part of the traitor legions. Maybe he could, jump from the Thousand Sons over to, the Black Legion. Okay.
I carry that name still, for it is all I have left of that life when I was but a child, but still wholly myself. I am Iskander Kaon.
is Candor Kaon. Okay. Alright.
And I think, General Skywalker, that you will find we have more in common than you may suspect. And I may have more to teach a prodigy like you than you can possibly imagine.
Okay, guys. Yes, that is it. I just want to talk before we continue on. There's like 19 minutes left of the video, and I think that's the after talk. But yes, this was Star Wars versus Warhammer 40K episode 25, Herald, made by AFanWithTooMuchTime. Yeah, there was multiple stories in this episode 25. First, we were dealing with Canoness Leandra and her gospel music, her attacking the clone troops and, being sealed off. And I think she's going to be cutting through that blast door and heading straight for those clone troops. I think they're preparing a trap for her, because I don't think they would just attack like this and expect any kind of change, or they would expect themselves to win. So I'm thinking the clone troops are planning a trap for her, and she's falling directly into it. What that trap entails, I'm not entirely sure. We'll have to wait and see what happens with Canoness Leandra. And we also got to see C-82. He is about to leave the ship with 84, who is not a Majos. They're preparing to leave the ship. The separatist vessel, I think, and we also got to see Nerva and Farnes. They're working together in the Imperial Night. Nerva is worried that after this situation, if she's still alive, if she's still able to be herself, she needs to keep this as a secret, that she was piloting the Imperial Knight, and the fact that there is a Imperial Guardsman inside the Imperial Knight with her inside, because like I've said before, I think they would consider something like this as sacrilege. People who are not part of the Mechanicus, people who don't know the rites and the rituals that are required to appease the machine spirit and to, worship the machine god. People who are not inducted into that society, if they're just in something so holy, so relic important like an Imperial Knight, it must be a very serious offense. And Nerva is really worried about, should anyone know the truth, what will happen to her. And then we also got to see the Jedi Knights Jaro and Mace. They were facing up against Sarafan. It's still not looking good. It's still not looking good in that battle. Like I've said before, I think they should retreat, all of them, because I don't see them winning this battle against Sarafan. And also, I don't see Sarafan winning against the Jedi, really. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what happens in that battle. And then we also got to see the Herald, who is Iskander Kaon. He's a Chaos Space Marine, a traitor Space Marine, who's part of the Black Legion. But when he said he was born on Prospero, I would have assumed that he would be part of Magnus and his 1,000 Sons, but he's part of the Black Legion. So yeah, that's quite interesting. Maybe, like I said before, maybe they are able to, go from one organization to the other without any problems. I don't know. I don't know how the traitor legions work really, but it was a very interesting, situation there. And I don't know. It seems to me that Kaon, or should I say Iskander Kaon, is going to teach. He's going to become some sort of like a close confidant of Anakin Skywalker. The way Anakin is also being very friendly with this Chaos Marine, and how he's excited, if I can say that he's finally found someone that could possibly have the answers to defeating the Imperium of Man. That might result in Iskander being the teacher who's going to teach the Jedis how to fight against librarians, how to fight against regular Space Marines, how to fight against the Sisters of Battle, as well as the Sisters of Silence. So yes, I would assume that maybe Iskander Kaon is going to become like the master, and the Jedi, most specifically Anakin Skywalker, is going to become his new apprentice. And I just don't know how is this going to turn out exactly. Are they going to become like Chaos Jedi? Is that going to be possible? Really? Because that will be very interesting to find Chaos Jedi. Yeah, but yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what happens in this new the enemy of my enemy is my friend, kind of situation here. And yeah, it was good. Really, it was good with all these small short stories in episode 25. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens in 26 with all of these stories. But yeah, like I've said before, I'm still worried about the Jedi who are facing up against Sarafan. They need to retreat. Anakin Skywalker and Iskander, they need to find a way to escape from this place. Nerva and Farnus also need to, keep a cool head and just destroy what needs to be destroyed. Don't go out in the battlefield and become heroes. No, don't do any of that. Just get this machine back to the Imperium of Man's operating bases, and keep it there, because this is very valuable piece of technology that needs to be saved for future battles. It's not easy to build, Imperial Knights, right? Just like Titans. It's not very easy to build them. You need a lot of resources, you need factories, and, these pieces of technology are very rare. So they should not become heroes and try to take on the entire clone army with one Imperial Knight. And yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what happens in episode 27. Whew. Okay guys, I guess that is it. Remember, if you want to check out the original video as well as AFanWithTooMuchTime's YouTube channel, the links are in the description below. If you like my reaction, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos. And let us continue with AFanWithTooMuchTime's after talk. I might cut this video into 2 parts. So you will probably see the card here if I do cut it into 2 parts. And yeah, let's continue.